What is up, Detroit Tigers fans and Detroit Sports Nation? AJ Reilly here with another episode of The Corner, recapping the disaster that happened this weekend, previewing a West Coast trip for the Tigers with the Angels, and then we're going to get into talking about those MLB playoff races that are narrowing in some cases and widening in others, and it's very, very interesting what is going to happen over the next few weeks. And then there was a report today about the GM search narrowing for the Detroit Tigers. But before we get into all of that, what I do want to say right now is a happy Labor Day to all that are out there. Hopefully you're enjoying the day with family and barbecues and good food. There should be some baseball on the tube this afternoon. And then this evening, the Tigers will play the Angels, who they did just beat a few weeks ago. So hopefully it'll end up being a good, relaxing day to those who are off of work. I also want to remind you that you can find Detroit Sports Nation on YouTube. Make sure that you click that like button, hit subscribe, and pound that bell for notifications for our latest content. And you can also follow The Corner on Twitter at DSN at The Corner for baseball discussion, commentary, and conversation. I'd love to meet you over there. Let's jump right into it because we've got a lot to cover today, and we're going to get into this playoff race. We last previewed or reviewed or whatever, discussed the MLB playoff race on August 19th. That week of shows, we looked at the divisional races and the wild cards, and broke them down and everything like that, and now we are getting into the nitty-gritty. So we're going to go division by division. I'm going to give you the leaders and the closest contenders. And then we're going to go and revisit the predictions that I made back that week too. All of them looking pretty good except for maybe one, and we'll get into that. So AL East, the Yankees lead by 5 games actually. They won yesterday over Tampa Bay. They lead 6 over Toronto. Tampa Bay and Toronto are the two closest competitors in the AL East, and they each play each other 9 times over the next few weeks, which is going to be huge when we get into that wild card conversation, because guess who the last 2 teams in the AL wild card are? Tampa Bay Rays and the Toronto Blue Jays. So it's going to be very interesting these next few weeks when the Rays and the Blue Jays are facing off. New York will play Toronto and Tampa Bay each 3 more times, and they'll play Tampa Bay this upcoming weekend again. Tampa, out of these 3 teams, has the hardest schedule. The Yankees has, quote-unquote, the easiest schedules, though they do face the Red Sox 6 times, and the Red Sox have fallen off. The Red Sox are not really in contention for a spot anymore, but it's the Yankees and the Red Sox, right? The Yankees and the Red Sox is the greatest rivalry in baseball. There's no question about that. Second, maybe a 1A, 1B situation with the Cubs-Cardinals. But those two, when they play each other tough, and it's going to be very interesting to see how those 6 games, especially with the way that the New York Yankees played in August and the scuffle that they had during August, if they can right the ship with the calendar turn, is going to be very interesting. Moving to the AL Central, the tightest of all races. Cleveland and the Twins are tied, and they both lead the White Sox by 2 games. Now, the Guardians will play the Twins 8 more times this season. They'll also play the White Sox 4 more times. The White Sox play the Twins 6 times, and the Twins play the Guardians and the White Sox a few times. The issue is, with this many games and this tight of a race, September is all that matters for these teams. The White Sox can close a gap. They've been playing much better since Cairo took over as their manager, with Tony La Russa being out indefinitely for health reasons. But it's going to be very interesting. Now, the White Sox specifically have the easiest schedule. They have 4 games with Oakland, 6 with the Tigers, and 2 with the Rockies. Cleveland has the next easiest with 9 with the Royals, 3 with the Angels, and 3 with the Rangers. Minnesota has 3 with Detroit left, so 6 with Kansas City, and 3 with the Angels. Whoever can take the most advantage of this easy part of their schedule is going to win, and then is going to win the division. And when we look at the wild card standings, when we look at what's going on with the wild card standings, The AL Central team, the runner-up for the AL Central team, is most likely going to be out of the playoffs. You have to win this division to be in the playoffs because you're already 5 games back of that last wild card spot. I think it's 5 or even 7 games back of that final wild card spot. And that's a lot of ground to make up in such a short amount of time. So for the AL Central teams, arguably one of the worst divisions in baseball, let's be very clear about that, you have to win the division to get in. In the AL West, barring some miracle by the Mariners, the Astros have it locked up. They have a 10-game lead going into the final month of the season. Not saying it's impossible, but it's improbable that they lose that division title. So let's flip over to the National League, the NL East. The Mets lead by 1 game over the Braves, with Philadelphia looking for a wild card spot, being 11.5 games back in the division. The Mets, moving forward, have the easiest schedule with 3 left with Washington, 7 left with Pittsburgh, 3 with Oakland, 5 with Miami, and 3 with the Cubs. While Atlanta has 6 with Washington, 2 with Oakland, 3 with Miami, and 3 with the San Francisco Giants. They also play each other 3 more times, which is going to be a massive, massive series for that division. The NL Central. NL Central, when we looked at it 2 weeks ago, the Cards had, I believe it was a 3.5 or a 3-game lead. That's what it was. They had a 3-game lead over the Milwaukee Brewers. Since that time, since August 19th, they've increased that lead by 5.5 games. Seattle still has 3 games with the Dodgers, San Diego, and 4 with Milwaukee. But they also have 4 with Washington, 9 with Pittsburgh, and 5 with Cincinnati. Milwaukee, on the other hand, has 3 with the Mets, 3 with the Yankees, and 4 with St. Louis left. They have 7 with Cincinnati, 4 with Miami, 3 with Colorado, 3 with Arizona, and 2 with San Francisco. The Brewers have all but played themselves out of a wild card spot at this point and have really hurt their chances in the division, now being 8.5 games back. In the NL West, it's the Dodgers who reign supreme. I mean, there's no question that the Dodgers are going to win that division. They have an 18-game lead with 30 or less games left to play. They would have to fall through the center of the earth for them not to win the NL West. So that division is all but locked up. Excuse me. So let's look at the wild card, right? The AL wild card has Seattle with a 2-game lead on Tampa Bay and a 3-game lead on Toronto. That gives them a 5.5 game lead on Baltimore, and like I said, a 7.5 game lead on the runners up in the AL Central division. Tampa Bay has a 1-game lead on Toronto. Toronto has a 2.5 game lead on Baltimore, and that's kind of that focus that you want to be, is that last spot of the wild card, right? With the playoffs expanding, that last wild card spot is going to be a difference. So Toronto having a 2.5 game lead on Baltimore and a 5-game lead on the AL Central division is significant. Really, the team that you're looking at that could flip-flop with them is Baltimore, which would be huge for that organization. Now, again, Tampa Bay and Toronto are playing each other 9 times in this last month, which is going to create some problems for either of those two teams. If one of those teams goes 7-2 in those 9 games, the team that only wins 2 games could be out of the playoff picture entirely. And that's significant. In the NL, San Diego has a half-game lead over Philadelphia, who has a 2.5 game over Milwaukee. Philadelphia is in that last spot with a 2.5 game lead over Milwaukee. And the next closest teams are like 8 games out, the Giants and some others. So really you're looking at San Diego, Philadelphia, or Milwaukee. 2 of those 3 teams are going to be in with one of them left out. And I've already given you my predictions that I think it's going to be San Diego that gets left out. Your division winners, here's my predictions just to revisit them. New York Yankees are going to win the East, Cleveland's going to win the Central, and Houston's going to win the West. The Mets are going to win the East in the National League. The Cardinals are going to win the Central in the National League, and the Dodgers are going to win the West. A lot of those are given, right? Especially now, right? Seattle being, or not Seattle, but St. Louis being extending the lead that they've had is making that prediction look pretty good. The Mets are a toss-up, especially with their slim lead over the Braves and a few more games with them. But I still think the Mets pull it out. Now, here's where it gets interesting. I think and believe that Toronto is going to be the team that makes the push to get into the wild card. Seattle's already basically a lock in the wild card. They have like a 98 or 99% chance of making the playoffs according to Fangraphs. The third team that I think sneaks in and maybe makes a run and a push, and this is where I think I'm probably going to be wrong, is the Twins. I'm not going to back down and change my predictions because they live in perpetuity on video, but 2 weeks ago I thought the Twins would make a push. They ended up going sub 500 in August. They are 1-2 to start September, so that pick right there is not looking fantastic. In the National League, I said that there's 2 spots for 3 teams, right? There's 2 spots for San Diego, Philadelphia, or Milwaukee. And I think that San Diego's still going to get left out. So I think Atlanta's going to be in on the wild card. Philadelphia is going to be in on the wild card. And I believe that Milwaukee will too. However, those last 2, Minnesota and Milwaukee, are going to make me look like a bad selector of teams when it comes to the MLB playoffs. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks. So definitely be watching those games closely. The stadiums are full of just playoff atmosphere and energy, and it is 100% fantastic. So make sure that you are tuning into those games to see if AJ was right. I'd like to think that I'm going to be, but Minnesota and Milwaukee are making me very, very, very nervous at this time. So let's talk about 2 teams that are not going to be in the playoffs, and that is the Royals and the Tigers. Now, the Royals play better than the Tigers. The Royals are better than the Tigers at this point. Because whatever it is, for whatever reason, as I said in the preview, if you were with me live last Thursday, this team is just pesky. And they proved how pesky they can be in this series. Game 1, the Tigers won 5-4. Drew Hutchinson pitched fantastic. And it was more difficult than it needed to be, first of all, but the Tigers had to earn that win. Game 2, Michael Pineda starts, gets blown up, and ultimately DFA'd. Thank everything that he was DFA'd, because he has not been good since he came back. And now some younger starters are going to get the opportunity to see, kind of finish out the season as they should have. I mean, this was a wasted opportunity. Letting Pineda start was a bad move by the organization. We've seen he blew up in Cleveland. He blew up in his next start off the IL, or went on the IL, and then now he comes back and he's blown up again. AJ said it's tough to tell somebody of his caliber and his career that they don't need his services anymore, which I understand that aspect of it. But he's not going to be competing in this window. He's not going to be on this team when the Tigers, whenever they have the opportunity to compete again, he's not going to be on the team. So, yeah, there's no reason to keep him around. It's not like you owe him all this money next year, a la Jonathan Scope, right? So you have to move on from guys like this to give guys opportunities to get their feet wet. Ryan Kreidler's come up, got his feet wet, doing a pretty darn good job, and doesn't look too terrible. Drawing walks, sacrificed flies, good at bats, struck out a couple of times, which I told you it was going to happen. But they're getting their feet wet, and that's big. With Miguel Cabrera, with Miguel Cabrera going on the IL with the bicep strain, Josh Lester is going to get an opportunity to make his debut. The 28-year-old minor leaguer who's been in the system since, I think, 2013 is going to get the opportunity. And he's probably not around when the team wants to compete. Maybe he's a bench piece. Who knows? Big power guy, high strikeout guy. but he's going to get the opportunity. That's the thing, right? We said improvements and opportunity. That is the focus. Tigers got blown out in Game 2, 12-2. Pineda was terrible. They had 2 extra base hits, both by Tucker Barnhart, who finally got off the schneid and hit his first home run of the season. So many games into the season. But, it is what it is. I looked at some tweets, and I think it was, again, Cody Straverhagen from The Athletic that said if Tucker had played in Great America Ballpark, he'd have 4 home runs already this year. But alas, he plays in Comerica and now has 1. Game 3, Matt Manning went short again, 4 innings, 3 walks, 2 runs given up. The bullpen held it down until Gregory Soto couldn't find the strike zone and was getting hit because he can only throw hard. His secondary pitches he cannot control, and it's creating an issue for him and potentially the reason why nobody wanted to trade for him at the deadline. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that Gregory Soto has trouble throwing strikes. Sure, the ERA might be low. Great, ERA is a starting point. But he has control issues. It doesn't mean anything if you can throw 1,000,000 miles per hour, but you cannot locate. And that cost the Tigers the game. What also cost the Tigers the game? 10 strikeouts from the offense again. Not to mention that the night before they had let Heasley off the hook and go 7 innings, a career high, because for whatever reason, when pitchers who are struggling come to Detroit, we make them look like Cy Young. It's crazy to me. A guy that has almost a 6 FIP had never been through 7 innings, and we, the Tigers, cannot get in to the worst bullpen in the MLB because we're letting him dominate us. It's insane. It's insanity is what it is. But alas, what it is another series loss to the Royals, who own the Tigers. Tigers are the worst team in the Central. 2022 is a completely wasted season. But we trudge on, and we head out to California, where the Tigers will take on the Angels. We've beaten the Angels. This was the series I told you, way back when, that the previous series with the Angels would be like one of the first ones that they could win on paper. Well, here's another opportunity for them to win a series. I was looking at strength of schedule and things like that, and the Tigers have like the hardest schedule for the remainder of the season in the Central, which is not great. Not great, but it is, what it is at this point. They could be playing, a college team, and it'd be a difficult game at this point. That's hyperbolic, right? These guys are major league players. They're not great major league players, but they're major league players. Don't take that, seriously. So let's break down this matchup. Let's look at what is going to happen over the next 3 games. Game 1, Monday night, just before 10 o'clock is going to be the first pitch. Tyler Alexander's taking on Jose Suarez. So let's look at Alexander. He's 3-8, 4.76 ERA with a 1.32 WHIP. And in his last 3 games, he's been awful. 13.2 innings pitched, 12 earned runs. Woof. Awful. He's got to right the ship or he's not going to be starting. He's going to be back in the bullpen where he was relatively effective in the bullpen. Jose Suarez is 5-6 on the season with a 4.10 ERA and a 1.32 WHIP. In his last 3 games, he's gone 16.2 innings pitched, giving up 8 runs. That's about a 4.50, just under a 4.50 ERA, with 16 Ks, so about a strikeout an inning. But he did pitch 6 innings and gave up 2 runs against the New York Yankees 3 starts ago. So, got to get to him. We're going to get to that in the keys here in a little bit. Game 2, Eduardo Rodriguez is going to be facing off against Mike Mayers. Now, Rodriguez, since he's been back, has gone 15 innings, given up 6 earned runs, but 5 of those runs were against Seattle in his last start. He has walked 8 people and only struck out 12 in those 15 innings. So it's very important that Rodriguez gets that zone control under control because you can't be walking as many people as he's been walking. Mayers in his last 3 starts gone 14 and a third innings, giving up 10 earned runs, 6 walks to 13 Ks. So definitely an opportunity for the offense to reverse the roles as to what they've done, like they did Game 2 against Heasley. In Game 3, the Tigers are going to trot out Drew Hutchinson against Patrick Sandoval, who, if you remember, threw a complete game shutout against the Tigers. And since then, he's gone 13 innings with 3 earned runs and 12 Ks. So the offense has, an opportunity to make some noise if they will. But that's going to require getting good contact on the ball. Not all contact is good contact. But at the same time, striking out is worse. We got to get the ball in play. You got to get the ball in play. Since the Tigers, here's some keys to the series. Since the Tigers beat the Angels at Comerica Park, the Angels are 6-7 since that series. In that time, they have 5 players, though, that have a weighted runs created that's above league average. Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, in that time, it's 12 games. They have 7 home runs and 158 weighted runs created between them. They are a bottom third team in fielding. They're top 12 in base running, but they're middle of the road, their roster is in walk rate, but they strike out more than anybody. So the Tigers can take advantage of these flaws in this series if they will. Their bullpen is middle of the road and about 15-16 according to Fangraphs. But that's worse than their starters who are at the top end. So the key is not letting them get into the game deep. You have to let these 3 guys that are starting against you go no more than 5-6 innings. You have to get into the bullpen, which is worse than their starting rotation. Proof of that being Game 2 on Saturday against the Royals. You let Heasley go 7 innings and didn't even have to really wake up the worst bullpen in Major League Baseball right now. The offense has to jump on opportunities. You have to make pitchers pay for mistakes. You have to make them work counts, work at bats, get the pitch count up, because pitch count is king at this point. We've seen it with our own problems. Matt Manning struggling, he's only getting 4 innings. He's only going to a certain pitch count. You have to get into this bullpen. So one more segment, and that is the Peanut Gallery. And there was an article put out today by the Detroit News and then reported by our own W.G. Brady that the Tigers have kind of zeroed in on 3 candidates. They're heavily considering, to quote the article, and I will give you those 3 names. Josh Burns, who's a senior VP of baseball operations for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Matt Slater, who's a special assistant to the GM of player procurement for the St. Louis Cardinals. And a name you might know, Sam Menzin, who's the assistant GM, who for the past 10 years has worked in the analytics, operations, and personnel side for the Tigers. Let's talk about these guys, right? Josh Burns has had stints as the GM for the Arizona Diamondbacks and also the San Diego Padres. And there have been people that have been critical about his time there. But let's not remember that while he was with the Diamondbacks, he also drafted names like Max Scherzer and Paul Goldschmidt. He also has been working with Andrew Friedman, who, hopefully there's some type of osmosis of information going on there where it rubs off and he could build a team. Now, when initial reports broke of the GM search, Burns' name was at the top of the list for a lot of people. Matt Slater has worked with the Cardinals, okay, in player procurement. And let's not forget that he traded for Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado. They just acquired Jordan Montgomery. And the Cardinals have been the model for consistency as an organization. The last time they were under 500 was 2007. And in that year, they won 78 games. Let's not forget that they also won the World Series the year prior to that, beating us. So this Slater is an intriguing name. The last one is Sam Menzin, who's the assistant GM right now with the Tigers. But I think that there's major red flags when we talk about him being inside the organization for the last 10 years in the analytics department, which criticism of that has come out very recently with the Robbie Grossman stuff in Atlanta. He's also worked in operation. He's also worked on the personnel side, which we know our personnel side is terrible. Now, how much of that is his fault? You can't really speculate, right? The guy's 31 years old. Would things be different if he were the one in charge? Potentially. But this is a major red flag. Major red flag for the amount of time that he's spent inside the organization in my mind. Because it seems like doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, which we know is insanity. So is Menzin, I hope that he's third on this list of three, personally. I think that if I had a choice, I think my selection out of these three, there are other names that I would throw in there, but out of these three, my selection would be Slater from the Cardinals. Because of the track record that the Cardinals organization has. You know, they're a good organization that develops talent and wins baseball games. And yeah, it helps to have people like a Adam Wainwright and a Yadier Molina, and it helps to have, an Albert Pujols. I get all of that, but let's not forget that this team, it takes 9 players to win a baseball game. And this organization, the Cardinals, has been a very good organization for a very long time. So if I had my choice, I would take Slater out of these three. I think Burns would be second, and then Sam would be kind of the consolation prize if neither of those guys wanted the job. But it's going to be interesting, and in Lynn Henning's article, and it's linked in the description, he talked about, this month kind of being the month to make the move. It would be very interesting to see if the Tigers make that move before the end of the regular season. Kind of get the guy in there, let him see and evaluate the players for the last stretch, and then make the choices that he needs to make. Because there's a lot of roster decisions that this GM is going to make over the offseason. There could be some pieces that are, one, moved for different type of player procurement or cut just to, start fresh. Candelario being a prime example. And if Kreidler comes up and hits the ball, Candelario could definitely be out of a job next year. If Kreidler, gets hot here towards the end of the season, he's already playing what looks to be better defense than Jeimer Candelario. So it'll be very interesting to see the moves that the Tigers will make in this offseason once they hire the GM. And it seems like their choice is down to about 3 guys. And I'll be with you the whole way when they make those moves here on the corner. But that is going to do it for our show today. We've talked about the disaster that was this series with the Royals, but the potential for a series win out in Los Angeles. And I'd love to hear what you think about the GM search in the comments. So please make sure that you put them there. I am AJ Reilly. This has been The Corner. I will see you again on Thursday before the next upcoming series. And until then, as always, even though it's very difficult,